8. Fragments. "What happens?" whispered Chris. "What happens next?" With the dark came a silence that was stifling. RQ clung to Chris, too shocked to speak. The mirror of reality cracked and opened like a slowly exploding flower. Snatches of time, trapped in shards of shattered mirror glass, came spinning oh so slowly past them. Different tableaux, trapped in different fragments, reflecting back and forth, creating corridors of jangling light and echoes of the past, the nightmare memories that haunt the darkened house. Chris and RQ stood together, timeless as time itself danced and fragmented around them. In the hall, the terrified cousins are trying to drag open the great doors. The huge drudges are forcing them back. Innocent stands on the dais. She is trying to calm the crowds of cousins. Someone throws something. Innocent clutches at her face. She is bleeding where she has been hit. In a wooden box trap, a little creature like a shrew is screaming. Glospin lies in bed, pale with a transfixed stare. Sathralope sits beside him, rocking herself slowly as she holds his hand. In a sudden spasm, he clutches tightly at her arm. Then he falls back, his fevered eyes close and his mouth drops open. After a moment, Sathralope takes a black rose from her bonnet and places it on his chest. "Good riddance," muttered RQ. "Was he dead?" said Chris. "That finished off his schemes." RQ pointed to another mirror shard as it spun slowly past. "Look over there! Look at the despair!" The cousins are gathered round the stone plinth in the hall. They are clinging to it like frightened kids, clinging to their mother. Tallow is dripping from a tilted candle. It drops into a dish of water, forming white shapes like mushroom skulls. Innocet holds the candle, a look of fear and anger on her face. Sathralope rages at Quences in his room, accusing fingers and eyes. He, far from frail, laughs at her as she storms out. He turns to work on a huge furry shape that lies on a table. Suddenly, the reflection within the turning shard cracked into dozens of identical little reflections. A double-bladed dagger held by a figure in black stabs Quences through both hearts. Quences stares in disbelief, his lips mouthing the word, "You." "Murderer!" yelped RQ. "That's who did it." "Who?" said Chris. "He came back to do it. It was him." Wine is spilling off the table. Chris grabbed RQ by the shoulders. "Who killed the old man?" he demanded. "Murderer! Murderer!" gasped the little man. Sathralope stares at them from the surface of a turning shard. Her chair rocks back and forth, soothing, lulling. Although Chris could not hear her, he understands the words she was mouthing. "Not dead. Just in stasis. Just waiting. He's not dead. A cortege is passing by. On the monstrous catafalque lies the body of murdered Quences. Not dead. Just waiting. Waiting in stasis. We're all waiting." "Is it over?" RQ stared imploringly up at Chris. He seemed to imply that Chris had some answer. "Is the waiting over?" "I don't know. I don't understand," stuttered the young adjudicator. The violence of the murder had shocked him cold. "Who was it? Who killed the old man? How long ago?" "Too long." RQ was drifting, moving slowly away. "No," he said angrily. "Nothing changes." "What do I do?" called Chris. "Show me." "We've already been shown." Chris saw that a bright eye was approaching. It pulled hungrily at him. It was the mirror through which he had entered this nightmare. RQ was already a distant figure in the gloom. "The will," he was intoning. "That's all that's left. Where's the will?" "Danger, mistress, danger!" K9 retracted his sensor from the operations port and backed away from Andred's desk. Leela turned the chair to see a Chancellery Guard captain standing in the office doorway. There were 2 other guards with him. "Stay there," she muttered to K9. "Lady Leela Andred Lumsag Winagachesima," the captain said formally. She stood and walked round the desk. "Leela is enough." As he stepped into the room, she saw that it was Jomdek. "I am here to place you under arrest," he announced. "For what crime?" "For using false security clearance codes to access classified information and bio-extracts from the Citadel secure systems." "Those are the Castellan's codes," protested Leela. "And they are not yours, madam. Does Castellan Andred know you are using them?" "He's not here," she snapped. "Then the charge is treason. I want to see the Castellan. He will be informed." Jomdek started towards her, but she darted back round the desk to where Canine was waiting. "These are traitors," she whispered. "Get the information we found to Andred." "Danger!" warned the robot dog, and extended the barrel of his gun from his nose. A guard with a ceremonial impulse staser came round the side of the desk. "No, Canine!" shouted Leela. Too late. A thin beam of hard light stabbed from Canine's gun, and the guard's staser was knocked from his hand. He fell back, clutching his smoking glove. Before Canine could turn round in the tight space, Captain Jomdek rounded the other end of the desk. A wild bolt from his gun scorched Leela's arm and hit Canine squarely on the flank. The robot lurched sideways into the desk, gave a squeal of protest, and stopped dead. Smoke wisped out of his joints. Leela grabbed at her companion, but the second guard pulled her roughly up. She angrily elbowed him in the stomach. As he sprawled across the floor, she turned to Jomdek. "Traitor! You cannot arrest me without the Castellan's orders." Jomdek raised an eyebrow. "There are higher authorities than the Chancellor and her Castellan," he said. "When Andred learns of this, he will have you stripped of your rank and publicly dishonoured." "As long as he isn't found guilty too," said Jomdek. "Bring the alien," he instructed the guards, and walked out of the office. The guards looked at Leela and then at each other. She looked down at K9. "Follow," she said to the guards, and walked out with them trailing behind. Chris Quedge forced open his eyes and stared woozily at the dark overhead. The air was close and stale. The floor was hard under him. Hard enough to make him think that he might be awake for once. Or was he just lurching from one nightmare to another? No change there, asleep or awake. Maybe his life was a string of bad dreams. A string that someone was pulling tighter so that the dreams were bunching up, no telling one from the next. A string on which to walk the high wire. "Whoa," thought Chris. "We're getting dangerously philosophical here." There was something soft under his head that tickled. He sat up and found that it was the doctor's pullover, neatly folded into a pillow. No sign of the doctor himself. Chris's skin itched. He looked down at his clothes and saw that a layer of dust had settled all over him. He sneezed loudly and heard something squeak and scuttle behind him. A small occasional table, startled by the sneeze, had frozen in mid-perambulation. It swayed towards him a little, as if it was curious. Chris sneezed again, and the table scuttled for cover in the dark on its spindly legs. "Damn," muttered Chris. "Still here." He scratched his bare arms, trying to shift the gritty dust. Sometimes it wasn't worth having a bath. If this was Gallifrey, he wasn't impressed. The place had gone to seed long ago, 673 years ago to be exact, or so he had been told. Nearby was the eye-shaped mirror hung with shreds of torn web. The doctor's oil lamp sat on another table. Next to it, on the surface of the table, the words, "Stay put, don't touch anything," had been neatly written in the dust. Chris lifted the lamp and tried to make out the TARDIS by the guttering flame. He was sure that he hadn't come that far, but the police box was nowhere to be seen in the gloom. Doctor? He called in a stage whisper, cautious of what he might disturb. He edged between the massive furniture, afraid it might take a dislike to him and crush him between its angular fitments. He reached the edge of a small clearing in the bric-a-brac where the shadows were particularly reluctant to disperse. He could just make out a stack of frames at the far side, which he did not recognise. Where the hell was the TARDIS? Somewhere on Extans Superior there was a rose coral beach where a hover hammock was floating by an antigrav tray on which sat 2 skyscraper glasses of drink like the indigo moonrise on Ubakal Zoo. That's what the brochure said. His name was already on the lime slice in one glass. The other glass was reserved for someone he hadn't met just yet. The hammock, swaying deliciously, was big enough for 2. But, Goddess Almighty, the Doctor had gone without him! Chris stepped forward, and his foot kept going. As he toppled into the dark, he dropped the lamp and lunged sideways. His arm caught on a heavy chair, and he scrambled to claw a grip on its smooth hide upholstery. The lamp shattered in the dark wells somewhere far below. The chair, creakily protesting, dragged itself away, pulling Chris up out of the hole as it went. He lay on the edge of the chasm, gasping back his breath. His knee was wet, cut on splintered wood. He was in total darkness. He was alone. Despite all the soul-searching and inner harmonizing of Dua Nuwa Heya Monastery, he really missed Roz. He dared not move. He wondered if the Doctor had been inside the TARDIS when it fell through the creaky floor. He wondered how long this place had really been neglected. RQ had been very precise for a dream. Dreams aren't evidence, thought Chris. But if RQ knew it was precisely 673 years, then the little guy must still be around. RQ could be downstairs now. If they'd shared the dream, if RQ was awake too, if he hadn't been hit by a plunging TARDIS, he could be having tea with the Doctor at this very moment. "Doctor!" shouted Chris. "You could have left a better note." Something clunked in the dark. Chris waited to see what he'd disturbed this time. Something was whirring. Something clunked again. The attic was suddenly filled with a pale light. All the furniture around Chris acquired a glimmering silver patina. Beside him, hovering above the hole through which it had fallen, stood the ghost shape of the TARDIS. Further along the attic, he saw the flickering figure of the Doctor bending over something that lay on the floor. "Chris, I'm sorry, Chris," buzzed the Doctor image. Chris walked through the glimmering forest of furniture to get a closer look. It was like being inside a pirate-copied holovid, 3rd or 4th generation down. The Sashi vid was playing back on the exact location where it had been recorded. He noticed a small wooden box sitting on a table opposite the eye mirror. A golden plasma screen counter on its front, the light he had glimpsed through the dust web, winked its progress through the recording. Chris saw himself lying unconscious on the floor at the Doctor's feet. The Doctor looked up, warily eyeing his surroundings. "That settles it. We're not stopping," he crackled. He raised his hat to the mirror. "Here I am," he said to the reflection. "This is your last chance, so take a good look. Remember me, Sathrolope? I am particularly sorry to have missed you." He stuck out his tongue. Chris half grinned. That explained a lot. If the Doctor knew Sathrolope, no wonder he was so anxious to leave. What were the odds that the Doctor's name was forbidden in this place, and that the Doctor had not shown up at the will reading despite receiving an invitation? And who was it that RQ recognised? The one who had come back to murder Quences. Chris knew what the Doctor was capable of, but he wouldn't do that, would he? Not murder. I mean, there must be a good reason for him to come back to murder the head of his own family. The holovid area surrounding him juddered and momentarily broke up. A surge of white dropouts streaked through the holographic air around him like a meteor storm. When they cleared, the image of the Doctor was dragging Chris's body towards the TARDIS. Chris actually dodged to let the images get past. There was a tiny, crunching, smashing noise. The ghost shape of the TARDIS keeled forward and slid through the floor in fountains of dust. The Doctor image yelled and dropped his Chris. He ran to the hole and stared down into the depths. The TARDIS didn't seem to have stopped at the next floor down. Chris could hear it crunching deeper and deeper into the echoing house. The Doctor had a look of total horror on his face. He stood for minutes on end, staring downward, shaking his head. Chris had never seen him so consumed with silent pain. Finally, the Doctor turned back to the unconscious image of Chris. He eased open Chris's eye with his thumb and stared at the unseeing pupil. Then he took off his jacket and slid out of his jumper. Underneath, he had been wearing his burgundy waistcoat all the time. He folded the jumper neatly and put it under Chris's head. He sat looking from Chris to the hole and back again. The real Chris moved across and crouched on the opposite side, facing the image of the Doctor. "Poor Chris," said the crackly soundtrack. "I'm so sorry. This was never meant to happen. I never meant it to come back here." He surveyed his surroundings with undisguised contempt. "Once upon a time, I was eager to flex the sinews of the universe. After all, who wants to be a spectator or even a player when you can be a pawn on the board in the thick of it?" He sighed deeply. "But chains from the past drag you back into the dark. Longbarrow is the worst place in the universe. I vowed never to return. But here I am, back. My mistake." He stood and pulled on his jacket again. He quickly wrote a message in the dust on top of the table and placed the lamp beside it. The real Chris watched the ghost Doctor walk further along the attic to a stairwell that he had not noticed before. The Doctor had the expression of a man going to meet his executioner. He paused at the top of the stairs, straightened his jacket and hat, and vanished downward. Almost immediately, the vid image of Chris on the floor groaned and painfully opened his eyes. "No point staying here," thought Chris, as he watched his image struggle up and discover the stay put message. Standing inside the holovid recording was not a lot different from witnessing the events in the house 600-odd years ago. Places, as well as machines, could record events. Maybe the house was the expert witness. Somehow he doubted the Doctor would admit to that. He doubted the Doctor would admit to anything. Anyway, if the events he had witnessed had happened so long ago, did they really matter anymore? Things would have moved on by now. An adjudicator never drops a case until the evidence is substantiated and verified. "Damn it, Roz! What do I do?" As he reached the stairwell, the silvery recording shut off behind him. The attic was smothered in darkness again. Chris reached out until he found a rail. One deep step at a time, he groped his way blind down the giant stairs, following the Doctor deep into the dark and watchful house.